After spending 19 years on death row, Lois Nadine Smith, also known by her chilling nickname Mean Nadine, was executed by lethal injection in the state of Oklahoma. She was 61 years old. But to understand how a 42-year-old mother became one of the most brutal killers in the state's history, we have to go back to the 4th of July 1982. That morning, 20-year-old Cynthia Lucille Bailey, or Cindy as her friends called her, was staying in a rundown motel in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. She got a phone call from her ex-boyfriend, James Gregory Smith. He told her he wanted to meet. He said there had been misunderstandings that needed to be cleared up. Cindy agreed, thinking it was going to be a conversation, nothing more. But when the car pulled up to get her, James wasn't alone. Behind the wheel was his mother, Lois Nadine Smith. In the back seat was another woman named Teresa Baker. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. They exchanged small talk as the car rolled down the highway. But then the tone shifted. Friendly chatter gave way to pointed questions. Accusations. Tension thickened inside the vehicle. And then Nadine turned in her seat, raised her voice, and made a terrifying claim. She said Cindy had tried to have Greg, her son, killed. Cindy was confused. She denied it over and over, but Nadine wasn't interested in denial. She didn't want answers. She wanted retribution. Without warning, she turned fully around in her seat, lunged forward, and wrapped her hands around Cindy's throat. Cindy struggled, gasping for breath. But Nadine wasn't finished. She reached into Cindy's purse, pulled out a knife, and stabbed her in the neck, hard. Blood poured out. Still, the car kept driving. No one moved. No one tried to stop her. And instead of calling for help or even slowing down, they just kept driving. Eventually, the car arrived in Gans, Oklahoma, outside a trailer belonging to Nadine's ex-husband, Jim Smith, Greg's father. Inside were Jim and his new wife, Robin. As soon as Robin sensed something was off, she stepped outside. She didn't want to be part of whatever was about to happen. Inside the trailer, Nadine forced the wounded Cindy into a recliner. She waved a pistol in her hand, as if the whole thing were some kind of twisted performance. She barked threats, fed off the fear in Cindy's eyes. Then she pulled the trigger. The first shot missed, slamming into the chair near Cindy's head. A warning, maybe, but what came next wasn't. Nadine shot Cindy in the chest and head 5 times. Cindy dropped to the floor, still bleeding, clinging to life. Then, as if it weren't enough, Greg, her son, reloaded the revolver and handed it back to his mother. Nadine jumped on Cindy's neck, stomping her with both feet, laughing while she did it. And then she fired 4 more shots into Cindy's head and back. No mercy. No hesitation. After the slaughter, they dragged her body into the bedroom, placed the pistol in her hand to make it look like suicide, and left. Left her bleeding on the cold, dirty floor like she was nothing. So how did it get this far? How did a mother become capable of something so brutal? Lois Nadine Dodd was born in 1940 in northeastern Oklahoma. The full details of her early life are hazy, but locals remember one thing. She had a mean streak. Mean enough that by her teens, people were already calling her Mean Nadine. It wasn't a nickname. It was a warning. She married young to Jim Smith and had 1 child, James Gregory Smith. Greg was the center of her world. And while most mothers are protective, Nadine took it to the extreme. By her 40s, she was loud, drinking heavily, and controlling everything around her, especially anything that involved her son. But when the rumors started, whispers that Greg was caught up in stolen guns and drug deals, Nadine didn't brush it off. Greg was just 19 at the time, angry, reckless, and knee-deep in a mess he couldn't climb out of. And tied to him was a young woman named Cindy Bailey. She was just 20 years old, but already worn down by addiction, motel hopping, and raising a child alone. She and Greg had spiraled together fast, and when it ended ugly. By the time they broke up, leaving her son heartbroken, Nadine had already made up her mind. She hated Cindy. And when someone whispered that Cindy wanted Greg dead, that was all she needed. There was no evidence, just street talk. But for Nadine, that was all it took. She didn't question it, didn't wait. That rumor became her truth. And that truth demanded action. And she didn't keep it to herself either. She told people, bragged, and even said Cindy needed to be put in her place. Someone ought to teach her a lesson. It stopped being just anger and started sounding like a plan. And still, no one stepped in. No one warned Cindy. No one thought Nadine would go through with it, but she did. By the time Cindy climbed into that car on July 4th, it was already done. The trap had been set. On July 5th, Cindy's body was discovered in Jim Smith's trailer. Neighbors had heard the gunshots the day before but waited to call the police. When they finally did, the investigation moved fast. Witnesses remembered seeing Cindy leave the motel with Nadine, Greg, and Teresa. Some even described the car. A man who lived near Jim said he saw that same car parked outside the trailer. Another neighbor said they heard a woman screaming. The suspects were obvious. Nadine, Greg, and Teresa were all brought in. And when investigators sat across from Nadine, she didn't try to hide. She didn't cry. She didn't make excuses. She leaned forward and said flatly, "Yes, I shot her. She was going to have my son killed." It didn't sound like an apology. It sounded like a justification. Greg told them the truth too. He had reloaded the pistol, handed it back to his mom. He never once tried to stop her. Sequoia County had never seen anything like it. Soon after, police recovered the .22 caliber revolver, blood-stained clothes, and empty shell casings. Everything lined up. The evidence was airtight. There was no mystery, no need for forensic tests or long interviews. They had confessions. They had the weapon. And they had a timeline backed by the two people who ended Cindy's life. So, less than 48 hours after Cindy's murder, Nadine and Greg were arrested. No puzzle. Just cold, calculated murder. Sallisaw had never seen anything like it. A mother and son arrested together in record time for one of the most vicious murders in Oklahoma history. The case moved quickly. By 1983, Nadine was facing trial for first-degree murder. The prosecution didn't have to prove who pulled the trigger. Nadine had already admitted to that. What they needed to prove was that it was premeditated, that it wasn't a moment of rage, but a slow-burning obsession that exploded on the 4th of July. The evidence helped them. So did Nadine's own words. And the autopsy sealed it. Cindy's body was covered in bruises with 9 bullet wounds and a deep gash across her neck that looked like someone had tried to silence her most desperately. The autopsy confirmed what Cindy never had the chance to say. Cindy had been shot 5 times in the chest, twice in the head, once in the back, and stabbed deeply in the neck. Any of those could have killed her. Together, they showed just how far Nadine was willing to go. Her defense team pleaded for mercy. They said she was afraid, that she believed she was protecting her son, that she had no prior record. Greg also testified. Torn between guilt and loyalty, he admitted to helping and said he honestly believed his mother was trying to save him. But the jury didn't see it that way. Nadine was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. Greg was sentenced to life in prison as an accomplice. Jim Smith and Teresa Baker were arrested as well, but their sentences remain unclear. Greg served 27 years before being paroled in 2009. But his freedom didn't last. Less than 2 years later, Greg, now going by James, was arrested again for drug charges. He served more time, was released in 2011, and then disappeared. Until 2014, when police in Montana arrested him again, this time for kidnapping and assault. According to reports, Greg had beaten and held a woman named Kathleen Mitchell against her will for almost 2 months in a motel room. She had fled Oklahoma to escape him, but by October 9th, he had already tracked her down. Across state lines, hundreds of miles away in Bozeman, Montana, James found her and took control all over again. For nearly 2 months, Kathleen was held against her will in a motel. He isolated her, threatened her, beat her, until one day, while he was asleep, she managed to whisper one word to 911, "Help." When police arrived, she begged them not to leave her behind. That day, James was arrested. But Montana wasn't the only place that wanted him. Back in Oklahoma, he was already a wanted man for violating parole. Now, he faced up to 10 years in prison for kidnapping. Though records don't make it clear how much time he served or whether he was ever returned to Oklahoma to face consequences there for violating parole. Meanwhile, Nadine had already entered death row at the Mabel Bassett Correctional Center. For 19 years, she filed appeal after appeal, claiming her nickname had biased the jury, that her confession wasn't fair, that she wasn't mentally competent. Every court, including the U.S. Supreme Court, denied her. Eventually, a date was set. On December 4, 2001, Lois Nadine Smith was strapped to a gurney. For her final meal, she asked for barbecue ribs, onion rings, strawberry banana cake, and a cherry lemonade. Her last words were calm. She turned to the victim's family and said, "I'm sorry for all the pain I caused you. Please forgive me. You must forgive to be forgiven." Then she added, "To live is Christ. To die is gain. Thank you, Jesus." In the witness chamber, Cindy's daughter, Brandy Fields, sat beside her family. She had grown up without her mother. She listened as the woman who took her mother's life asked for forgiveness. Afterward, Brandy spoke through tears. "If she meant it, you have to forgive even though it's very hard. It helps a little, but it doesn't bring back my mom. I wish she had thought of this before she did what she did." At 9:13 p.m., just 2 minutes after the drugs were administered, Lois Nadine Smith was pronounced dead. She became the first woman sentenced to death in Oklahoma after capital punishment was reinstated, and the last woman the state ever executed. Wanda Jean Allen and Marilyn K. Plants were both executed earlier that same year. But for Cindy's family, justice had been served. What do you think? Did justice truly prevail? Or did it come too late? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more real crime stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Stay safe and stay aware.